The house had always been a place of familiar rhythms and quiet comfort. Morning light would spill through the kitchen window as her son, Ethan, shuffled in with a sleepy smile, the clatter of cereal bowls and the hum of the radio marking the start of their day. But lately, those sounds seemed to fade into a strange silence that settled over the rooms. Doors that once stood open now remained shut, muffling whatever was happening behind them. The laughter that used to bounce off the walls was replaced by a stillness that made her heart tighten. She noticed the subtle shifts first, Ethan's usual eagerness replaced by a withdrawn quietness, his eyes avoiding hers, his presence shrinking into the shadows of their home. His routine changed too. He lingered longer in his room, the door closed firmly, and when he emerged, he seemed distant, as though carrying the weight of something he couldn't put into words. She wasn't angry or suspicious. Rather, a quiet worry began to bloom inside her, an instinctive fear that something was wrong. This wasn't about control or discipline. It was about a mother's need to protect her child from whatever was troubling him. Sleepless nights followed, filled with the endless turning of thoughts and the gnawing question of what lay behind that closed door. She tried to talk, to reach out, but the conversations were clipped, the answers vague. The distance between them grew, not from a lack of love, but from the unspoken tension that neither knew how to break. Her heart ached with helplessness, caught between respecting his space and the desperate urge to know if he was safe. After days of wrestling with her fears, she made a decision she never imagined she would: to install a camera in Ethan's room. It was a choice born not of mistrust, but of love, an attempt to bridge the growing silence with a watchful eye, to find reassurance in the unknown. She told herself it was temporary, a quiet guardian in the shadows, a way to understand before the distance became a chasm. The camera was small, unobtrusive, tucked away where it wouldn't be noticed. Yet, once the footage began to stream into her phone, the house itself seemed to change. The walls that once echoed with warmth now felt heavy with secrets. Every corner held possibility, every silent moment a question. The simple act of watching turned the familiar into something unfamiliar, and she realized that what she might see could alter everything she thought she knew about her son, their home, and herself. It's a feeling many parents know all too well, that uneasy space where worry outweighs certainty, where love pushes you toward choices you never imagined making. She hadn't planned to cross this line, yet here she was, watching the quiet moments unfold through a lens she had placed without his knowledge. The weight of each frame settled deeper than she expected, stirring a mixture of hope, fear, and something more complicated: doubt. If you've ever faced a decision driven by a fierce love tangled with fear, you understand how those moments can blur the boundaries between protection and invasion. It's not easy to admit, but sometimes the urge to know overrides everything else. And in those moments, the line between right and wrong isn't always clear. Stay with her story until the end, because the truth doesn't reveal itself all at once. It unfolds slowly, reshaping what she thought she knew and challenging the very reasons she chose to watch. What began as a quiet observation becomes a journey into unexpected discoveries, ones that might change her view of her son, herself, and the trust that holds them under the same roof. If you've ever wrestled with a decision like this, when love and fear collide, consider liking this video. And please share your thoughts in the comments. Was she right to watch, or are some boundaries meant never to be crossed? There's no easy answer here, only the fragile, human struggle to protect those we love while respecting the space they need to grow. In the quiet rhythm of their home, subtle shifts began to ripple through the days that the mother could neither dismiss nor fully explain. At first, the changes were almost imperceptible, small moments that could easily be attributed to normal fluctuations in mood or routine. Yet, as days unfolded, these minor disturbances started to weave themselves into a pattern that tugged at her attention with increasing insistence. Sleep, once a steady refuge, became fragmented. She noticed her daughter lingering longer in bed in the mornings, as if reluctant to face the day, but more telling were the restless nights. Occasionally, the soft glow of a bedroom light would seep through the closed door well past midnight, revealing a figure wide awake, eyes tracing the ceiling or scrolling through a phone with a tense grip. These episodes were not frequent enough to be alarming on their own, but their recurrence planted a seed of unease. Alongside this, a retreat from the familiar began to take shape. The daughter, once engaged in lively conversations at the dinner table, now offered brief, clipped responses, her gaze often fixed elsewhere, as if her mind wandered to places no one else could follow. Invitations to join family activities were met with polite declines or vague excuses. It wasn't a refusal born of rebellion or defiance, but a quiet withdrawal, signaling a growing distance that was hard to quantify yet impossible to overlook. The emotional atmosphere shifted too, though never with dramatic flair. There were occasional moments when anxiety flickered across her face, a quick tightening around the eyes or a subtle bite of the lip that vanished before anyone could ask what was wrong. These fleeting expressions were like shadows, barely there but enough to disturb the calm surface. The mother found herself watching more closely, attuned to these soft cues that hinted at something beneath. What made these signs particularly unsettling was their cumulative effect. Each instance, when isolated, could have been written off as a passing phase or the natural turbulence of adolescence. But layered together, the sleep disruption, the withdrawal, the unexplained anxiety, and the growing emotional distance, they formed an invisible thread pulling taut with quiet urgency. It was a pattern that whispered of internal struggles, of thoughts and feelings unspoken yet deeply felt. Throughout this time, the mother maintained a calm, steady presence, careful not to press too hard but unwilling to ignore what her instincts urged her to see. She moved gently around the edges of her daughter's space, offering support without intrusion, seeking moments of connection amidst the growing silence. There was a delicate balance to hold, respecting privacy while remaining vigilant, love expressed through observation rather than confrontation. In this fragile dance, the mother recognized the complexity of the situation, a subtle shift that demanded attention without alarm, understanding without judgment. It was a quiet plea for help, articulated not through words but through the faintest of signs, ones that only a careful, watchful heart could discern. This awareness grew steadily, guiding her thoughts and actions as she prepared to navigate the uncertain path ahead, hoping to bridge the distance before it became unbreakable. She hesitated to confront him directly, not because she doubted her instincts, but because the stakes felt unbearably high. The fear of being wrong gnawed at her, the possibility that she might misinterpret innocent behavior as something darker, that her suspicions could shatter the fragile trust they still shared. The thought of accusing her son without concrete proof was terrifying. It risked painting him in a negative light, potentially driving a wedge between them at a time when connection was most needed. This fear of misjudgment made silence seem safer, more compassionate. She wanted to protect him, but also herself, from the pain of an irrevocable mistake. More pressing was the fear of pushing him away. Their relationship, already delicate, was balanced on the edge of silence and half-spoken worries. To confront him head-on could ignite defensiveness, rebellion, or complete withdrawal. She remembered how he had shut down before, retreating into his room for days after even minor disagreements. The last thing she wanted was to become a source of pressure or judgment, forcing him further into isolation. Instead, she sought a way to remain close, to stay present in his world without demanding explanations he might not be ready to give. The camera became a quiet guardian, a presence that allowed her to observe without intrusion, to understand without accusation. This choice was not born from mistrust, but from a profound moral conflict. She wrestled with the balance between respecting his autonomy and ensuring his safety, between honoring his privacy and fulfilling her role as protector. The camera was a tool of reassurance, a way to gather information gently, to see what she could not hear in words. It was not surveillance for surveillance's sake, but a tender attempt to watch over him from a distance, to catch the subtle cues that might otherwise slip away unnoticed. Through the lens, she sought to decode the unsaid, to detect the moments when he seemed lost or vulnerable, hoping to intervene with care rather than confrontation. Even as she set up the camera, she questioned herself. Was this an invasion of trust or an act of love? The answer was never simple. Every frame recorded was a silent prayer that she could protect him without breaking the invisible threads holding them together. She knew that the truth, when it came, had to be handled with patience and empathy, not accusation. The camera gave her time to understand the full picture, to prepare for the conversation she hoped would come naturally, when the moment was right. In choosing observation over confrontation, she embraced the uncertainty of waiting. It was a quiet vigilance, an ongoing dialogue between hope and fear. She watched not to control but to care, not to judge but to comprehend. This delicate balance defined her every decision, shaping a new kind of motherhood that required strength, humility, and above all, unwavering love. Under the same roof, this silent watchfulness became her silent vow, to be present, to protect, and to hold space for the son she knew, even when the path forward remained unclear. She moved through the dimly lit hallway with deliberate caution, the small camera clutched tightly in her hand, feeling heavier than its weight. Each step echoed softly, but the quiet seemed to amplify the tension coiling in her chest. The house was asleep, or at least pretending to be, and she needed to be as well, unnoticed, invisible. Her fingers trembled slightly as she peeled the adhesive backing, the act feeling oddly intimate and yet profoundly invasive. It was a breach of privacy she never imagined she would commit, but the justification in her mind softened the sharp edges of guilt. This was temporary, necessary, a shield rather than a weapon. She hesitated before choosing the spot, a corner near the living room ceiling where the lens could catch the most without being obvious. The surface was cool and smooth, and pressing the camera into place sent a small wave of discomfort through her. It wasn't just the physical sensation. It was the idea that this small device, so silent and watchful, was now a part of their shared space, a silent witness to moments that should have been theirs alone. The thought unsettled her more than she wanted to admit, but she pushed it down, focusing on the purpose behind her actions. Her breath caught briefly as she adjusted the angle, careful not to disturb anything that might arouse suspicion. The camera's lens glinted faintly in the moonlight filtering through the window, a tiny eye that would observe without judgment. She imagined it recording not just images but the fragile threads of connection she was trying to mend, the fragile hope that this surveillance might offer a window into his world when words failed. The intrusion felt like a betrayal, yet also a desperate act of love. She stepped back, watching the camera settle into place, and a pang of doubt gnawed at her. Was this really the right way? Was this the kind of protection he needed or deserved? The line between care and control blurred, and she wrestled with the unease that lingered long after the device was silent. Her hands itched to remove it, to erase this moment, but the weight of responsibility anchored her resolve. This was a temporary measure, a bridge to understanding rather than a cage. In the stillness of the house, she allowed herself a brief moment to breathe, the silence pressing in around her. The camera's presence altered the room subtly, transforming it into a space both familiar and foreign. She knew that soon, the watching would become routine, a background hum to their lives. But tonight, the act still felt raw, an intrusion wrapped in necessity, a quiet confession of vulnerability and hope. She turned away slowly, her footsteps lighter now but her heart still heavy. The camera was installed, a silent sentinel beneath the same roof, bearing witness to a love complicated by fear and courage. In the shadows, she carried that weight alone, holding onto the fragile thread that might one day lead them back to each other. The room was dim, illuminated only by the soft glow of the laptop screen. She settled into the chair, the hum of the device filling the quiet space around her. As the video began to play, a wave of relief washed over her. The footage showed the familiar corners of the living room bathed in gentle evening light. Nothing out of place, no sudden movements, no shadows lurking where they shouldn't be. Just the quiet stillness of the house, the muted ticking of a clock somewhere off-screen. Her breath evened, and for a moment, the tension in her shoulders lessened. The mundane scenes played out steadily. Empty chairs, a stray book left on the coffee table, the slow sway of curtains stirred by a soft breeze. The ordinary comfort of the images seemed to affirm the silence she had hoped for, the reassurance that the night had passed without disturbance. But as the minutes unfolded, a subtle shift began to creep in, unnoticed at first. A slight flicker on the edge of the frame, almost like a trick of the light, caught her eye. She blinked, adjusting the brightness, but it lingered, a faint, wavering blur that didn't quite settle. It wasn't alarming, just odd enough to raise a small question in her mind. She leaned forward, watching more intently now. The camera's angle, fixed and unchanging, captured the space in a way that almost felt too static, too deliberate. Sometimes the shadows seemed a shade too deep, swallowing corners whole. The silence on the recording was unnerving. Not because it was filled with noise, but because it was so complete, as if the house itself was holding its breath. The usual creaks and groans of settling wood, the distant hum of city life outside, were all absent. A clock chimed softly, marking the passage of time. She felt the weight of the empty room pressing in, the slow, steady rhythm of the footage contrasting with her quickening heartbeat. Moments passed, and she noticed a flicker again, this time in the reflection on the windowpane. Something moved, perhaps a shadow crossing behind the glass, but it was gone the instant she focused on it. She replayed the segment, frame by frame, but the mystery remained elusive. No clear form, no unmistakable shape, just a fleeting impression that dissolved into the grainy darkness. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating. She tried to shake off the creeping unease, reminding herself that the camera might be catching nothing but harmless quirks of light and shadow. Yet the sensation that something was slightly off, just beyond her grasp, settled deeper in her chest. The footage was not threatening. It was subtle, an absence of normalcy rather than the presence of something wrong. She continued watching, the scenes looping gently. A chair shifted just a fraction, as if nudged by a breeze that wasn't there. The faint hum of a ceiling fan, absent in reality, whispered through the audio track. The softest rustle of fabric, a muted sigh carried on a breath she couldn't place. None of it overt, none of it screaming for attention, but enough to make her lean closer, to search for meaning in the quiet anomalies. And beneath it all, the steady pulse of her own doubts grew louder, threading through the calm night recorded on the screen. The footage was a quiet witness, but it told her more than she wanted to hear. Something unseen was watching back. Her eyes remained fixed on the screen as the faint movements unfolded, each subtle shift refusing to align with the narrative she'd rehearsed in her mind. The figure, or whatever it was, moved not with the frantic urgency she'd expected but with a measured, almost deliberate calm. It was as if the presence wasn't driven by fear or malice, but by something altogether different, something foreign and disquieting. Her initial dread, the stark image of a threat invading their sanctuary, began to blur into something unrecognizable. She blinked slowly, shaking her head as if to clear a fog that had settled over her thoughts. The footage didn't match the scenario she'd feared all along. No abrupt crashes, no frantic scrambling in the shadows. Instead, a slow, almost curious exploration took place. The figure lingered near the edge of the frame, pausing as if studying the space, and then retreated without a trace of panic or urgency. Her heart didn't race in the way it had moments before. Instead, confusion knotted in her chest, heavier and more awkward than fear. A quiet disbelief settled over her, like a cold draft creeping through the cracks of her resolve. She wondered how she could have been so certain, so convinced that danger was imminent. The evidence before her unsettled every assumption she'd made. It wasn't the expected intrusion, the violent interruption of their peaceful nights. It was something else entirely, something that defied neat explanations or easy answers. She felt as if she were staring through a glass wall separating her from a reality that bent the rules she thought she understood. Her mind raced to catch up, piecing together fragments of sensation and sound she'd ignored or dismissed before. The soft rustling, the barely audible sigh. These were not signs of alarm but of something quieter, more deliberate. The presence didn't feel hostile. It felt observant. And that observation was disarming in its own way. It was a reminder that the world under their roof was layered with mysteries she hadn't anticipated, and perhaps couldn't fully grasp. A shiver ran down her spine, but it was not the shiver born of fear. It was the kind that comes from confronting an unknown that unsettles your sense of control. She leaned forward, her fingers brushing the edge of the screen as if reaching for a clue that might make sense of the unexpected. But none came. Instead, the footage looped quietly, indifferent to her confusion, holding the truth in its steady, unblinking gaze. In that moment, the mother realized that what she saw was not a threat to be fought or a danger to be fled. It was an enigma, something that challenged her understanding of the space they inhabited. The quiet presence was neither friend nor foe, but a silent witness to their lives, existing just beyond the edge of comprehension. And that realization weighed on her with an unsettling gravity, pulling her deeper into a realm where certainty was a fragile illusion. When the footage from the camera was finally reviewed, it became clear that what had been recorded unfolded with a rhythm and subtlety that defied immediate comprehension. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place. Normal sounds, familiar movements, the gentle creaking of the house settling into the night. But as the minutes stretched on, the camera's perspective slowly revealed something far more complex, a pattern woven into the fabric of the environment itself. The recorded moments were punctuated by pauses, stretches of stillness so profound they almost seemed deliberate. Within these intervals, the camera captured faint shifts, forms that hovered just beyond the edge of clarity, movements that never quite resolved into something recognizable but were unmistakably purposeful. These subtle actions suggested an intelligence, a presence that observed and adapted rather than acted with direct force or violence. What made the discovery profoundly unsettling was how this presence seemed to mirror the family's own routines. It appeared to learn their habits, the timing of their steps, the cadence of their voices, as if it was silently cataloging their existence. This was no random haunting or chaotic intrusion. It was a patient, deliberate engagement with the world under the same roof. The way it moved and paused hinted at an understanding that transcended human logic, blurring the boundary between the familiar and the unknowable. The emotional impact of this revelation was immediate and visceral. It was not fear in the traditional sense. The threat was intangible, but a creeping sense of exposure, as if their private moments had been quietly observed by an entity that neither judged nor intervened, yet whose very attention was invasive. The psychological weight of being seen without consent, of having one's life catalogued in silence, stirred a profound discomfort. It challenged the family's sense of sanctuary, transforming their home from a place of refuge into a stage where unseen eyes watched from the periphery. Moreover, the pattern of the presence's behavior suggested a complexity far beyond a typical intruder or a supernatural apparition. It seemed to possess a patience that defied human understanding, choosing when to reveal itself through subtle signs rather than overt actions. This careful modulation of its visibility created a tension between knowing and not knowing, between the desire to understand and the fear of what that understanding might bring. The implications extended beyond the immediate household. If such a presence could exist unnoticed, quietly entwined with daily life, what did that mean for the boundaries between reality and something else entirely? It forced a reconsideration of how the family perceived their environment and their place within it. The presence was neither a foe to be battled nor a mystery to be solved in the conventional sense. It was a reminder that the world might hold layers of existence that operate alongside human awareness, indifferent to human concerns yet profoundly affecting emotional and psychological states. This discovery unsettled the mother most deeply. She found herself grappling not only with the presence itself, but with the erosion of certainty it represented. The camera had revealed an enigma that refused to be neatly categorized, a silent witness whose quiet observation unsettled the very foundations of trust and security. In that revelation lay a new kind of vulnerability, one born not of fearsome threats but of the unsettling realization that some aspects of existence remain forever elusive, quietly inhabiting the spaces we call home. The moment she fully grasped what the camera had captured, the familiar walls of her home seemed to contract around her, pressing in with an oppressive weight. It was no longer a sanctuary, but an arena where unseen eyes watched, where mystery dissolved the comfort of certainty. The child she had cradled in her arms, whose every breath was a testament to life's fragile beauty, now felt like a puzzle piece in a larger, incomprehensible picture. This knowledge did not free her from doubt. It deepened it, twisting her perception of everything she once took for granted. Her mind spun in restless loops, haunted by the silent enigma that occupied their shared space. The child's innocent laughter, once a balm to her worries, now carried an eerie undertone, as if it were a language only the silent observer understood. She questioned every gesture, every smile, as if the child's essence was altered by some unseen force, and she was powerless to protect or understand it. The certainty of motherhood, usually a source of strength, became a fragile veneer over a chasm of uncertainty. Guilt gnawed at her relentlessly. Had she failed to see the signs? Was there something she overlooked in the quiet moments, the subtle shifts in behavior? This knowledge, far from providing answers, amplified her sense of responsibility to safeguard her child from both visible and invisible dangers. The home, once a symbol of safety, was now a fragile bubble that could burst at any moment. She wrestled with the paradox of knowing more yet feeling increasingly helpless, as if the weight of understanding tethered her to a reality too complex to navigate. Fear crept in quietly, threading through her thoughts like a cold wind. It was not the fear of immediate harm, but the dread of an unknown future shaped by this invisible presence. What did it want? How long had it been there? Could it harm her child? Or was it simply an observer, trapped in its own silence? Each question multiplied, creating a web of anxieties that tangled her heart and mind. The burden of knowledge was a heavy shroud, suffocating in its quiet persistence. Yet, amid the turmoil, responsibility anchored her. She could not turn away or pretend ignorance would restore peace. The knowledge demanded vigilance, a constant awareness that blurred the lines between protection and paranoia. She found herself scanning shadows, listening for sounds that might betray the silent watcher's movements. Her nights grew restless, her days punctuated by moments of sudden alertness. This was no longer just about her child or her home. It was about confronting an unknown reality that challenged her very understanding of safety and love. The burden of knowing transformed her world, fracturing the illusion of normalcy and replacing it with a fragile equilibrium between hope and dread. It was a heavy price to pay, this awareness that some truths do not bring relief but deepen the shadows that linger just beyond reach. In that weight, she moved forward, wary, watchful, and irrevocably changed. The moment the truth settled into her mind, the mother felt the first tremors of a difficult path unfurling before her. There was no clear map, no straightforward answer. Instead, she faced a landscape of decisions where every choice carried weight and consequence. She understood that acting too quickly could shatter the fragile balance she had managed to maintain, yet waiting too long risked allowing the situation to spiral beyond her control. Restraint became her silent companion, a force that demanded patience even when her instincts screamed for immediate action. Her days unfolded with a new kind of vigilance. She observed, measured, and whispered questions to herself that had no easy answers. How much to reveal? To whom? When? Each of these questions felt like a tightrope stretched over a vast chasm, where a misstep could lead to irreparable damage. The mother knew that exposing the truth too soon might provoke panic or distrust, especially from those closest to her. Yet, concealing it risked isolation, misunderstanding, or worse, letting the darkness grow unchecked. She found herself caught between the impulse to protect and the need to confront. The people around her looked for reassurance, expecting her to lead them back towards safety and normalcy, but she could not offer false promises. Her restraint was not born from coldness or avoidance, but from a deep recognition of the complexities involved. Sometimes, silence was a shield, a way to contain the ripple of uncertainty until she could find firmer ground. Other times, it was a burden, a lonely vigil that separated her from the life she once knew. Timing, she realized, was a subtle art. The revelation had shifted the rhythm of her world, but she could not force the future to bend to her will. Instead, she needed to listen to the unspoken signals, the quiet shifts in mood, the small behaviors that hinted at what might come next. This attentiveness demanded energy she did not always have, and moments of exhaustion threatened to erode her resolve. Still, she pressed on, understanding that the consequences of her decisions would ripple outward, affecting more than just herself. She weighed the risks of confronting others with what she knew, To share her knowledge could invite conflict and suspicion, yet withholding it might breed resentment if discovered later. The mother grappled with these possibilities, aware that her role was not simply to protect, but to navigate the tangled web of relationships that defined her life. Each conversation, each choice to speak or remain silent, required careful calibration. There were nights when the weight of the unknown pressed so heavily on her chest that sleep became elusive. In those quiet hours, she wrestled with doubt and fear, recognizing that there was no perfect solution. The burden was not a matter of heroism or villainy, but of human complexity, of making imperfect choices in an imperfect world. She was neither savior nor antagonist, but a woman learning how to live with a truth that demanded courage as much as caution. Through it all, she remained tethered to the hope that clarity might one day emerge, that the shadows could be pushed back just enough to breathe freely again. But until then, she moved forward with deliberate steps, aware that what she had to do next was less about grand gestures and more about the quiet endurance of holding space for what was, what could be, and what might never fully be understood. In the fragile dance between protection and intrusion, the story Under This Roof reminds us how easily love's intentions can blur boundaries. What begins as a maternal instinct to shield can spiral into a quest for truths that were never meant to be uncovered, or worse, truths that once revealed, change everything irreversibly. The mother's choice to cross that line was born from a place of deep care and fear, yet it carried consequences she could neither have predicted nor controlled. This delicate balance between safeguarding a loved one and respecting their autonomy is something many grapple with silently. Love, in its purest form, strives to protect, but when it becomes a force that disregards privacy, it can fracture trust and bring about wounds that linger far beyond the moment. The revelations that emerged were a double-edged sword, illuminating hidden realities but casting long shadows over what remained unspoken. In moving forward, the characters are left holding a complex truth, that sometimes knowing more doesn't bring peace but invites new questions, new fears, and a heavier kind of responsibility. The endurance required now is subtle but no less profound, the quiet act of accepting that some mysteries under the same roof may never be fully solved, and that healing often grows in the spaces where understanding falls short. As viewers, this story challenges us to consider where we stand when love pushes the limits of respect and privacy. Was the mother justified in her actions, driven by a desire to protect her family at all costs? Or did she cross a line that should have remained untouched, disrupting the fragile fabric of trust in their home? We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe she was right or wrong? Who do you know that would be captivated by this psychological exploration of family secrets? Share this video with them, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that reveal the hidden truths inside ordinary homes. The lines between love and intrusion are thin. Sometimes, it's only through dialogue that we begin to understand where they truly lie.